Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Faye Bishop Report. And this is more celebrity bullshit, unfortunately. Sorry, gang. Uh, Apparently, famed producer and media mogul Quincy Jones did an interview with Vulture magazine where it appears he was on a quest to destroy the credibility and reputations of his dead peers. In this interview, which I think everybody and their mother is encouraging everyone to read, I didn't get anything from it. All it just came across like gossip, gossip, and more gossip. I didn't learn anything new about him. I didn't learn anything different about the artist he spoke about in the interview. I mean, he talked about Michael Jackson and his work with Michael Jackson. He alleges that Michael Jackson used to steal music. He talks about Michael Jackson's problem with propofol. He talks about how Marlon Brando had relationships or slept with, allegedly, Richard Pryor and Marvin Gaye and all of these other people. These are things we knew. He talks about the Beatles a little bit. He gives his opinion on that. He didn't tell anything. He talks about the Bill Cosby situation and how, he was friends with Bill Cosby, Brett Ratner, and Harvey Weinstein, and that it's no surprise to him that they are currently dealing with the sexual misconduct accusations they're dealing with. He really didn't talk about anything. He did get asked the question that I think most musicians of his generation get asked, pretty much any musician who was born before 1975. What do you think about today's, culture of music as opposed to when you were doing music? Blah, fuckity, blah, blah, blah. No one cares. And at the tail end of the interview, he mentions Quest TV, which in my opinion, he could have spent the entire interview talking about. But instead of doing that, he wanted to drag his peers. But, Quincy Jones is 84 years old. I don't know what kind of headspace he's in. I'm not even going to guess. I really, really don't. But I find it interesting that of all the tea spilled here, because I'm going to be honest, unless you were born after the year 2000, you already knew this shit. Marlon Brando was openly bisexual, as was Richard Pryor. Okay, we all know about how Michael Jackson died. We all know about his issues with drug use. He could have kept the Ivanka Trump thing. Nobody cares if you used to date her, didn't date her. Nobody likes the Trumps anyway. This is, to me, the whole thing came off like a gossip column. But what I did find interesting that he didn't mention, and I thought that he would talk about it because it actually connects to the current generation today. And that is the fact that Quincy Jones was the founder of Vibe magazine. Vibe magazine was very instrumental in the Tupac and Biggie East Coast, West Coast beef. Very instrumental. And I thought that he would go into detail about it, but of course he wanted to talk about everyone else and not himself. How did he play a part in it? It's simple. His magazine took advantage of a broken friendship between two popular rappers, and they exploited it for financial gain. That beef was pretty much orchestrated by Vibe magazine back in the day. It's a beef that ultimately led to the death of those two guys. Vibe would purposely misquote both of those rappers, Biggie and Pac, in interviews. And they would make it allude to Big was taking shots at Pac, Pac was taking shots at Big, or Big was taking shots at the West Coast, Big and Diddy, and Pac and Death Row was taking shots at the East Coast. I mean, they would even do cover photos, cover shoots, and write taglines on the covers that took shots. I remember when Vibe purposely put East versus West on the cover with Diddy and Biggie. Does anyone else remember that? And Diddy even said later on, we didn't know that they were going to do that. Diddy said they didn't even know that that's what the whole interview, their intent was behind doing the interview with them until they saw it on newsstands like everybody else. Biggie even got shot. The night Biggie got shot was at a Vibe magazine party. They purposely let known bloods into that party. I just remember all of that from back in the day. And I thought that Quincy would talk about how the magazine he was running at the time had direct scoop, direct inside insight on everything that was going on during that era in hip hop. That would have made for a better interview, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, guys. I'm not saying Quincy Jones was the trigger man. No, none of that. But did Vibe magazine play a part in everything that was going down? Absolutely. Absolutely. Sure. Vibe magazine, the magazine that Quincy Jones founded, was so entrenched in that beef, it's not even funny. It was even their suggestion that Suge Knight wear the red blazer on another cover that they did. Kevin Powell was a senior editor at the time. I remember him constantly running up to the jail when Pac was in jail, doing interviews with him. He gave no fucks at the time either, because he only had one goal in mind, and that was to outdo the Source magazine by any means necessary. But in the end, Quincy Jones profited off of all of that. And he never once opened his mouth to say, wait a minute, this is wrong. So if there was anything in that interview the journalists could have asked him, the questions that he could have asked Quincy, was definitely about that. Because what Vibe magazine did, and it wasn't just Vibe magazine, it was several media outlets that contributed to a culture in hip hop where rappers were dying and getting shot at every turn. Pac and Biggie, Big L, it was a ton of them at the time. And what had happened was you set the tone. You set the blueprint for the generation of rappers and black culture and hip hop culture that we have today. That is the correlation. So if there was anything in that interview that I personally would have liked to see him discuss, or any tea, quote unquote, that he should have spilled, it should have definitely been that, and his role, the role he played, and the people he employed played in creating the fucked up culture that we have today in black music. But he didn't. And you know what? I'm not even mad about that. I'm not even as mad or upset at Quincy for telling us pretty much things that we already knew as I am the general public, us, meaning us, for being so entertained by that. And that's what I want to know. Why are we so fascinated with gossip? Trashy gossip at that. Especially when you consider the current political climate we have going on right now today and the current conditions that we're living in. Why is it we don't have a better dialogue going? That's what pisses me off. This is one of the elders of the black community who could have used the Vulture platform to do an interview on the current conditions and the current climate of the black community. But instead, he used it to trash dead celebrities. And we are drooling over it. It's sick. We really do not have room to care about that kind of stuff. I'm sorry. We just don't. I honestly didn't even think that outing people in 2018 was still a thing. Honestly. I didn't think that people still cared about who was gay, who was on the down low, and who was sleeping with who, especially since 99.999% of these celebrities all have social media accounts. They all put their own business out there anyway. And the people that Quincy Jones was talking about are dead. And I personally feel like him talking about them was disrespectful to the families and children and grandchildren of these people. So why do we care? Right now we have Donald Trump as a president. And this is the stuff that goes back to something I spoke about in an earlier video. You see the types of things that we're fascinated with, the filth and the trash of people's lives, the gossip, the nepotism, all of that. You see how we're fascinated with that type of stuff, and you still don't understand why we have Donald Trump as a president? You don't understand it because you're just like him. You're just not being honest with yourself about how much this culture we're living in, Donald Trump is a direct reflection of it. And that Quincy Jones interview and how we're so fascinated with it is a shiny example of that. It's time to get a better dialogue going. It's time to start holding people accountable as well. And yes, that includes celebrities. If they're not out here trying to get a better dialogue going or to talk about the current state of our conditions and how to fix it, then we don't need to be paying them any attention. We don't need to be putting them on pedestals. We don't need to be spreading the jargon that they're talking about. We don't need to have anything to do with them. You're either here to help or you're either here to hinder. We need to get out of clinging to this escapist entertainment and all of this escapism that's deflecting and distracting us away from having the conversations that need to be had about our current conditions. You want to know what's going on with our current conditions? Google the city of Baltimore. Google the city of Baltimore. They had over 343 murders in the year 2017 alone. $10,000 abandoned buildings. The first 9 days of 2018, there were 12 murders. You want to have a conversation? Let's start talking about that. Let's talk about how the local constituents in these local governments are failing its people. They're failing the citizens. Let's start with that. Let's start talking about stuff like that. Because if you want to be frank, we're not doing it enough. We live in a culture and in a country where everybody thinks it's more important to get Monique a damn job with Netflix than it is to fix our current conditions and what's going on in our local communities. It's time to get off of all of that celebrity shit. And I've been talking about this the past several videos. Okay? All of this gossipy trash and this filth. Honestly, we need to be all past that. The era of all of that is done. It's time for us to stop with the distractions and to get more focused. Work towards building a better education system. Work towards getting 10,000 men jobs versus one Hollywood celebrity. Getting these communities built up, holding these politicians, not just no damn Donald Trump, but the local ones, responsible, and getting their asses out of office so we could get everything together to fix our conditions, because we're facing extinction. The wealth gap is continuing to widen, and all we're worrying about is which celebrity is worth $1 billion, which one isn't. Oscar's so white, which one is getting an Academy Award? We got to get off of that. I'm dead serious. It's really time for us to stray away from that kind of stuff and to get back in tune with what it is we really need to do. We're a quarter of the way, almost. We're about 7 years out from being a quarter of the way into the new century. We got to get to work. So let's, get the dialogue back on track and start working on some strategies to get to work on what it is we need to do. I'm Faye Bishop. This has been your daily report. And I will get with you guys later on. Don't forget to subscribe.